so why don't we do that? I am Dan Shapiro. I am Secretary of State for Alice's designee as chair.
Bob Welch, Dr. Howard Zucker, Commissioner of Health.
And I'm Chris Wild, representing Attorney General Eric Schneider.
Tony Melillo, Counsel to the Cemetery Board.
Joe Ambrose, Associate Accountant, Division of Cemetery.
Mike Seelman, Senior Investigator, Division of Cemeteries.
Chet Butkowitz, Assistant Director, Division of Cemeteries.
Great, thank you. Tony, why don't you take us through what's happening with legislation?
Did you want to do the minutes?
Oh, yeah, I do want to do the minutes. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, they were so short and concise that I actually discounted them. Have we had a chance to look at the minutes? Anybody have any questions, concerns, comments?
Yeah, I wasn't here, but they look good.
Yep. Did we say, you know what, did we say that?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Anything, Chris?
No?
Okay.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Actually, you weren't here, so I'll second.
That's right, I can't
You
second.
recuse yourself.
It's a habit.
And we will vote aye.
That takes care of it.
All right. Okay.
Now, Mr. Malone.
Session is done. So the actions reported in this report are the actions for this session. 2 bills passed both houses. Let's see. I think the first one was number 14.
Locust Valley.
This is an interesting one. It will allow cemeteries to use income from the Permanent Maintenance Fund. This is Senate 5111A, Assembly 7802, probably 7802A. Would allow cemeteries to use income from the Permanent Maintenance Fund, allow cemeteries to use net appreciation in value. Basically, it's allowing them to use a formula that's set up in the not-for-profit corporation law for trust funds. And it's the provision in that section that it refers to has 8 steps that a trust fund holder is supposed to go through before using income. But there's a good deal of discretion in there. It would be a big change for the way that the PM fund is managed. Mm-hmm. It has passed both houses. It's on the governor. It's heading to the governor. And the other bill, much less controversial, number 21. This is Assembly 9457, Senate 7105. It would amend the section in the NPCL, section 1506, which prohibits cemeteries in Nassau County from acquiring land.
So which number is that?
Assembly 9457, Senate 7105.
Right, and that's in direct response to the Locust Valley situation.
Correct. Right.
Which we approved with the caveat,
right,
as I recall. Right. So.
And everyone agreed that the board was correct with that caveat that there was a concern.
I wasn't happy about it then. I'm not happy about it now being correct.
But this fixes that.
Okay. All right. Very good. Rules and regs. We did have an adoption, did we not?
Yes, the Pet Cemetery reg has been adopted. It's been published. It goes into effect. It's early August, I believe. It was 60 days from when it was submitted for publication. So, yeah, that will take effect soon.
Okay.
We're still working on the financial reg. We actually have finished our latest draft of the reg, but the reg will now require every cemetery to file the division's financial report, as well as if they're required to file a CPA, it would be in addition to anything else. So we're revising that report, and what we want to do is present that to interested parties with the revised reg. So once we have the report finished, we'll submit that to the interested parties, and of course present it to the board.
It's been a long road.
It has, but we're getting there.
There's a learning curve on this, which is not bad.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. In Lewis's absence, do you have anything, Chet, for us?
Actually, I do not, other than the fact that what's on the agenda is that the division participated in outreach and put on presentations with respect to information that, cemeteries hopefully will find useful, with respect to accounting procedures, operational procedures, and things of that nature. So between Director Louis Polishuk, I almost said Louis Fishman,
Yeah.
and division staff, putting on PowerPoint presentations and answering, questions from participants. It was well received, and
Yeah,
So-
how many folks do you think?
I don't know the exact numbers. I don't know, was there representation by
altogether,
NYSAC?
Close to 100 people between both regionals.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
pretty good.
It's
Yeah.
a start.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
excellent.
okay. I'm glad you're getting out there.
And
That's
it's
good.
great collaboration with Joanne and NYSAC representatives.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, no,
So-
I think that's a very healthy thing. Wonderful. Is that? Nope, I thought it might be this. Okay. Well, Chet, why don't you just
Yeah.
bridge right into the vandalism?
Yes, for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2015, vandalism collections were $23,296. Applications pending are $710,643. 4 of those pending applications are on today's agenda.
Oh, well, do I know it? Okay.
And that's a report.
All right. Why don't we go right to the vandalism orders? So we have 2 for Spring Forest. One is really to correct
A typo.
typographical error.
Yep.
All right, I'm sure there's no problem with that. The other is the infamous fence, basically. I'd like you to explain, because I didn't quite follow it. There were some historical documents in there, and I sort of lost the thread.
Yeah.
In fact, at one point, I said, well, where is their authority? I forgot we did the takeover. But anyway, the 177,500 is for what? I mean, obviously, is that entirely the fence, or did you also include the other items that were asked?
The other items were already approved.
We already approved
and
those. That was the
resolved.
40-something
That's correct.
thousand
Yes.
That's correct, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
all right, so now we're just talking about the fence.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good. And, yeah. Now, folks taking a look at the proposal, I mean,
I had the same question.
I'm going to let Mike
Right.
speak on that also. Is Mr. Pappas available on the room?
I think Louis
He's not here.
mentioned to me that he's available by phone.
Okay.
If we'd like to talk to
we
him.
need,
I don't know that
If we need.
I don't know that we need to yet.
Okay.
I know that Louis has been intimately involved
Mhm.
in dealing with this issue.
Yep.
And making sure that, in fact, this was done as economically as possible. And I think he's gotten to the point where, this is the quote,
Yes.
what I'd like to do with this.
Yes,
Yeah, this is it, right? I mean, division, does anybody disagree?
we started at $319,000 just for the wall. We involved an engineer from the Department of State, went down and looked, came up with a scope that he felt would repair it, greatly reduce, actually, it was less than this 177,000. And I think we met in January, and Louis and I, and we had codes people from the Town of Union, Village of Johnson City, and the Department of State. And between January and when these quotes were made, the wall shifted even further. And so these quotes were revised.
Oh,
And
okay.
again, they had a meeting with the engineer from Department of State, and he's in agreement that this is the quote.
Now, I know Louis has had some concern about the scope of the project, the time in which it would take to complete the project, and the provision of the monies, whether it should be upfront or almost akin to reimbursement based. And I know he's had conversations. He's not here to tell me about them, but are you aware of those conversations? What the cemetery was certainly willing to take a portion and apply it back to us.
I
division.
I spoke to Lewis about it yesterday, and then I also spoke to Peter Pappas.
Yeah,
And the lesser of the two, the $177,000 bid requires 50% down
okay,
to begin, because a big part of it is excavating the wall that's there. And so they'd like to have that
Yeah.
down. And from what Peter said, the contractor is more than willing to, begin with the 50%. Now, Lewis had mentioned something about maybe even a third as opposed to a half, but I had no discussion with Peter about that as to whether that would be acceptable. So as far as I know, it's 50% is what they would need to start.
all right, well, for that, why don't we get them on the phone? I mean, we're gonna make sure this project gets done, but I wanna see,
Why was Lewis proposing a third instead of a half?
I think that was really more just an idea of a completed contract method, I don't know.
or you know what, I'll tell you what, why don't we, because a project of this size, we don't normally get them, for one project. I do recall some wall project somewhere, and it was you that was that money. So, why don't we, since Lewis is gonna be here shortly, why don't we just wait for Lewis? He's got the conversations. We may not have to have the conversation. If in fact he is aware that 50% is what's necessary to get this thing started, then we'll just go with that. So,
One of the other things that we brought up is the original allocation for the other work at the cemetery included, I think, $11,000 for a mausoleum repair, or
The cleaning?
The cleaning and whatnot.
yeah,
That has not been completed. They still have the money that's earmarked for that. They're trying to schedule that now. And Lewis suggested that maybe we include some provision to hold back that portion of it on this next, like the wall allocation, until that is completed. Now, yesterday, in talking to Peter, they're scheduling it. They had some confusion as to what the money was for. They, it was for hazardous monuments, but
yeah.
there was some confusion there. So they're going forward with that.
Okay.
But I want to be clear that they haven't spent that portion of the original allocation.
So what's the timeline for completion of this wall?
He's, for the completion of the wall, I don't,
Because this is concrete and the ground and everything else.
yeah, I don't know that.
String it out too long because we're in July next month.
I think
Yeah.
that's what they're,
No, we're gonna take, I think we're gonna be able to handle this today, but, all right, so, since Lewis has been so involved in this one, why don't we just give him 10 more minutes to get here, we'll come back to it.
okay.
The only other thing I noticed on town of Whitestown, there was a piece of that was for monument repair at 1260-675, which is pending, right?
Yes, the
Didn't have to
original amount that they requested, went out and looked at them, and they really, when we're doing an administrative, it's different than the hazardous monument. It's a little bit more liberal if they're broken or if they're inhibiting maintenance.
Right.
And many of what they included were neither dangerous or inhibiting maintenance. So I requested the new quote. They were only able to get one quote. And then the other question I had, historically, when it's an abandoned cemetery that the town is applying for, we haven't required the legal notice, and they did not include a legal notice. And I've requested that they get the second bid, and if necessary, get the legal notice. So,
I don't know, we have not required that in the past, right? Or we just haven't thought about it.
yeah, because
To be honest with you, because all things being equal, I would like the people who are responsible for the monuments to pay for them,
Right.
if they're willing to do that, or if we can locate them. And I would certainly make that reimbursable, just as it's reimbursable for cemeteries. Is there any issue there, Tony?
Explain that to me again.
Well, with the hazardous monuments, it's right in the statute or the reg that requires them to post legal notice, and then we came up with the format.
Right.
But for the administrative, because it's not specific to the monuments, it's, topsoil, it's trees, it's everything, there is no specific requirement. So when you read the application, it's not in there. And we haven't always required it, or whether we've just missed it or haven't concentrated on it, but I did notice it this time.
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood. The notice would be for, that you're talking about would be for what?
The notice would be to inform the lot owners or descendants of the lot owners that there are hazardous monuments in the cemetery.
Right, okay,
And that they're either gonna be, that they should repair them,
right.
and if they don't, they will be repaired or removed by,
Just as in the regular notice.
just like a hazardous
Okay,
monument.
so
Right.
the only difference here is this is through the town takeover.
Yes.
That's what you meant by administrative.
Okay,
Yeah.
now I understand.
Right.
I mean, the town is doing an application for hazardous monuments. So I think the hazardous monuments requirements should be met.
Yeah, I think what protocol is there.
Okay.
You know, I think it's a good idea, all right, and it's no skin off the
Agreed.
town's nose.
Because it'll be reimbursed.
Right, so I would like them to do that, because that's the fiscally responsible thing to do.
And that's kind of why that was left out. Most of those monuments are more along the, there are some that are hazardous. There are many that have fallen and created a maintenance hazard.
Right.
So the more important aspect of this was really the tree work
I got it.
that's in the other port. That's why I submitted it this way. And I'll get back to them and tell them they need a second estimate and the legal
and
notice. And we'll use the same format
Right,
as for the hazardous monuments.
sounds good to me. Is that all right, everybody? I mean,
Yeah.
all right. All right, so maybe we take this motion, because Town of Whitestown is just gonna be, if we're all agreed that 41,901 is approvable, we approve that with, inability for town to come back to us with a monument repair. In fact, I'll move it, I just moved it.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. I don't think we did the others.
We did.
You're approving everything but the monument.
We didn't, we
Correct.
just, we
Yeah.
Maple Ave.
No, we didn't. You want a motion, Maple, and the first Spring Forest?
Yeah,
So moved.
Okay.
second.
That's in the affirmative. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, and we still have Spring Forest defense pending Lewis's return.
The
So we'll-
abandoned part.
Yeah, so we'll come back to that.
What is the purpose, Dan, of the notice? You can come in and repair them if you want to.
So
Why
we
wouldn't
tend
they
to
if the
approve
state's
if they go to
You know, some do, because it's there, it's very rare, I'll grant you that. But some people, they have an attachment, obviously, and they want to take care of it because it's their responsibility, you know?
And secondary to that is also if the monument is to the point where it needs to be removed, it's
So
giving,
that's a really good thing.
it's giving legal notice to them that it will be removed, and then when they come back in 10 years to remove the monument, there will have been legal notice posted.
Yeah, that's protective for the town too. I mean, you know, we told you. Okay. It's not like last month when we had an agenda that was this big. We have a lot of interesting pending applications here.
Just so I'm clear,
Yeah.
Maple Avenue is approved in total. The first application of
900 for Spring Forest is
Right.
approved.
And
The
then-
town of Whitestown, 41,901 is approved.
No,
And-
the 41,901 is the minor repair, so it's everything but the village.
The 41,000 is tree work,
Yeah,
topsoil, the
Oh,
building,
okay.
the fence.
Okay, I misread that.
yeah, there was a separate 12,675.
All right.
And here's Lewis, so we don't have to pen this.
Which,
Well, that was fun.
which may change because we're requesting a second
Yeah,
estimate.
of course, yeah, that's, they
Okay.
can come back to us.
Thanks.
What do we have, Jim?
All right, so I actually we had a little conversation on Spring Forest and the $177,000 for
Uh-huh.
the fence. And what I held it for was that we had had conversations, Mike, about parsing out the money on this, because the amount of the money, the nature of the project is not unprecedented.
Yes.
And we've been told that the cemetery is 50% down, because that's what the contractor wants to do the excavation. There's some talk that you were talking to third, didn't want to proceed until we had a shot.
I think we would request that, I guess as follows. Number one, the whole thing be approved. Number two, we be authorized to expend up to 50% initially, with the understanding that number three, we think for a project like this, something like a third would be typical for a private contract, and would rather spend it out that way assuming the contractor's actually willing to work on those terms.
Did you have any conversation with the cemetery on the third?
I did, and they thought it would work, but didn't give me any definitive one way or another, but they thought that it wouldn't be a problem. That's what they told you too. huh?
And what they said was, if you look at the estimate, it requested the 50%, and that's where Peter left it.
The issue here is that a fair amount of this is actually materials. They may have to bring in new stones,
No question.
so it's more than your
I
typical.
have no problem with that. You know, and here's the thing: whether or not it's going to be a third, or parsed out reimbursement or whatever, I don't know that we care.
Leave it up to the division.
Yeah, I think that the division is very capable of determining, working with the cemetery to determine the flow of the money. I think the only thing we have to do initially then is to provide that it will be parsed out by the division for the division's discretion. So, unless you want something more definitive, okay.
No, the only other wrinkle, did we discuss this already, is we had specifically, the board had previously authorized about 46 grand for everything but the wall. And my understanding is that the board's resolution itself said no more money until you've spent that money and shows how you've used that.
That's usually the case.
They have 10 grand they haven't spent yet. There seems to have been an issue as to what they thought it could be spent for versus what we think it could be spent for. And I think that's been resolved, but the money hasn't been spent. So what I would ask is, notwithstanding what the board said, we go ahead and approve this now, with the understanding that we're going to hold back 10 grand until they've accounted for that other 10.
And that's.
But that does require your action because of what you said the
Because we
previous
said
time.
that we wouldn't grant.
Right.
So I have no problem with that. All right. Any conversation about this?
So we have any sense of the contractor, the third or 50%, is that gonna be a deal breaker?
If it's a deal breaker, we'll give them 50%. But I think, in terms of just managing both our cash flow and the contractor's progress, I'm more comfortable with giving them less upfront. And if the materials aren't more than a third of the cost plus a little bit of labor, there's really no reason they shouldn't agree to it.
So what will trigger the release of the next third when they spend down the first third?
They'll show us what they're spending. Yeah, they'll give us. My understanding is the way this works on state contract. Let me contrast state contract with private. State contract, my understanding is the way this works is 25% up front, and then you go out of pocket for 75% until you're done.
Depends on the
You
contract.
you often don't get progress payments.
Right.
That seems a little
No.
over the top here.
Yeah.
But whether we would pay them a third once they've spent the first third, we'd pay them the next third, or whether we'd make them go out of pocket to some extent. I mean, this cemetery doesn't have anything, so.
The motion you're considering isn't going to have that restriction.
Right, the motion.
So
would
you're
be
just
at
gonna
the
let us figure
discretion
this
of the
out.
Division, but if there's any issues, you would let us know.
Okay.
I can't imagine there will be, but. All right, does anybody want to make the motion? Want me to make the motion? Did we remember it well enough? All right, I'll motion. I'd motion to approve the application Spring Forest Cemetery for $177,500 for the repair of the fence.
Wall.
Wall, right. The division is granted discretion to parse out the money as it deems appropriate. And it is also noted that the prior order of the division with respect to Spring Forest Cemetery, which prohibited us from in fact taking action on a future application until all the monies were spent down from that prior application, is deemed waived. And that too will be left to the discretion of the division to resolve in the course of time.
Well done, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
I will second that.
All in favor, say.
Got all that down?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll give you my
Second.
edition of Moby Dick next week. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. For those who follow Israel politics, the issue of the words fence versus wall consumed huge amounts when
That's
the
wonderful.
quote-unquote security barrier was built.
Yes, that's true. Okay. Woodlawn Cemetery, terminating trust.
This is actually an odd one, and I'm not sure it should be on the agenda because there's no board action required. They want to terminate a trust because the expenses
Yeah.
compared to the size of the
I
trust.
think we had this conversation
Right.
a couple months ago, actually,
I haven't.
informally.
I've been working with the AG on this. It requires a court order, and my only concern is some of the trust funds are being allocated to general funds once the trust is terminated, and they're doing it based on an email that Rose, our division staff, Rose sent. But I think she was only reporting in her email on how the cemetery was reporting its trust assets. I don't think she was authorizing that 20% of the trust funds be used for general funds. So once I get that clarified with Rose, I'll speak with the AG about, whether 80% or 100% of the trust funds should be still continued to use for the intended purpose, even after the trust is terminated.
I'm assuming, one thing to find out is that 20% appreciation on the trust, or is it, what's the reason for that?
I think that's my understanding, is that for example, there was $100,000 that was part of the trust, that approximately 20% or $20,000 was actually interest and dividends that the trust had earned, which would be available for general maintenance and preservation. And I think, Tony, as you were saying, that I think that's what was in Rose's email, indicating that approximately 20% of that trust was interest and dividends and available for general maintenance and preservation of the cemetery. So hopefully it's nothing more than that. But
Okay.
that was my interpretation anyway. So I'm with you on that.
Okay.
Since there's no board action required, that's great. I had no problem with this, reading the papers.
And thank you, Tony. I'll remember this time.
Good.
All right. Let's continue conversation, we'll move on. All right,
The next application for Delvin, we're actually going to withdraw that for now.
good.
Although, sorry,
Go ahead.
no, you finish.
No, it just, in retrospect, it needs a little more work.
Though I
It might be
guess
before it's time.
one thing the division would probably want the board's guidance on, to the extent this is a public policy matter and not a legal matter that we should deal with in executive session, is this is a situation where a cemetery, we assume inadvertently through ignorance as opposed to malice, went ahead and built something without
Yeah.
getting a prior approval.
Yeah.
Is there anything special beyond what's in section 201.11, which clearly didn't get you in this case, but is there anything in addition to that that the board or council would want to see where a cemetery's sort of gone rogue and built something?
I think it's the usual analysis, but the usual analysis as to whether this was intentional, was it done ignorantly, and in the report it indicated that it was done naively, if you will. There may be some damage done that we may not approve the project, and that could be an issue, but
One of the things required by 201.11 is prior posting in advance of any work and in advance of the cemetery board's review. Obviously, that has
Yeah.
not been done.
Right.
So that has to be addressed somehow. And now you have a month
The
to
post-
post it now.
Yeah.
The
2 months.
posting was made. They
It
did
was.
post it after the fact, yeah. In fact, Cindy sent me a copy.
Yeah,
of it.
again, this is.
And that's why it's,
Yeah,
Okay.
this is my bad. I kind of ran with the application on the agenda based on a conversation with division staff. Unfortunately, I didn't get the complete paperwork or exhibits literally till just the other day, so it really didn't catch up with the packet.
Okay.
But in retrospect, I will look not to put it on the agenda, to have all the exhibits in front of me to avoid
right. One other thing to
the
look at,
confusion.
since you're going to have more time, is the 2% annual return over the course of 24 years,
Right.
bringing in a total of, what was it? I can't read my little writing, but
Yeah.
it's really small. It really
Yeah.
calls into question,
Yeah.
you know, the need for this. Now, their need may be that that's all the market can bear, and they perceive a need in the community
Right.
for this service, which is a
Right.
different argument than the fiscal argument.
Agreed.
But that you should examine that.
Yeah, agreed, yeah,
Because
yeah.
on the numbers, I'm saying, why the hell?
Very
Why
unimpressive.
would we be doing
Yeah.
this?
Although another thing Rose
Yeah,
could talk
yeah.
to them about is, are they proposing to charge too little for this? Could the market bear something else?
Right. And again, these are estimates. You know, over time, the prices are raised, and
We went, I don't know
Yeah.
if the cemetery said 24 years, but I think we went to great, we were trying to help a lot, all right? The 24-year projection, I think, is a little silly. I just, you know.
Well, many times these things, I mean, if they're selling, they'll sell in 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And they'll be looking to build the next one.
Exactly right.
Which would adjust the.
But that's why I was concerned, because this application didn't show that. It showed, okay, but anyway.
One more thing. There's a report in here that there's a deficit in the PM fund that they should be able to make up with their general fund. So hopefully, when you bring this back, it will have been done.
Yeah, cure
Right,
it before
right.
it gets back.
Okay.
That would be very good.
All right.
Marathon Cemetery modified return. They too have a PM deficit. So they ignorantly withdrew from the PM for maintenance, whatever. They can now cover that deficit
Yes.
with the modified total return
Yeah.
withdrawal. The money is fungible and all that.
Correct.
My only question was, are the expenditures, the basis for the expenditures that were made, all right, are they the kinds of things that can be spent on the modified return monies?
Yes, yeah, the
All right.
the cemetery is some 13 acres. They're underfunded with respect to the permanent maintenance funds. The revenues, on average, $40,000 or $45,000, and expenses average about the same. Donations help them sort of keep their head above water. Most expenditures are for operations.
They're all volunteer?
The whole board is volunteer. The only individual is the treasurer that maybe gets $1,500 a year, but salaries are $18,600.
Wow.
And administrative fees are some $2,000 for management and administration. So, and again, this is a 13-acre cemetery. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around the numbers. We have 5-acre cemeteries that spend more than that.
Yep.
So,
Okay, so this will make the PM fund whole,
yes,
and they'll also have operational monies to boot, because now you've shown them how to do it.
that is correct. Yeah.
Good problem.
Anybody want a motion? Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Evergreen, Community Mazo.
Are we tabling this, Chet?
I think so.
Okay,
Again, this is one of the late arrivals of supporting documentation. I had anticipated a bit earlier.
I won't
However,
even talk about it, let's go to the next.
Okay, very
table.
good.
Fairview
Cruising right along.
Cemetery, PM deficit repayment. There are 54,000 and change in the hole. But I sort of stopped reading. It looks like there's repeated invasions and repeated dismissal monies, or am I not getting that right?
This again is one of the cemeteries that's struggling to make ends meet. I also invited a division senior accountant to help explain the details of the operations there and their need to have a non-pro-tunc order to invade
All right,
PM
well,
principal.
Let's hear.
So, Rich?
Yes, it was discovered at our most recent audit that they had basically spent out of the PM.
Why don't you sit at the table, so
So you get recorded for
then
posterity.
you'll be immortalized.
Yeah.
All right.
Thousands maybe hundreds of thousands of people that watch this video. Right?
See, with you on the video, we'll be trending.
So probably need to precede a little bit that the cemetery actually had an order to invade PM principal.
1995
Right.
was the last order. They had actually paid that down to about, I think they paid back about $4,000 of that, and then things kind of went south.
So let me, because this is important to me. So it was 1995,
Yes.
right? They hadn't invaded at that point, but they went to court to take a loan. I mean, what happened in 1995?
That's when they received their last PM loan.
So they got a
Technically 1994.
So that wasn't an invasion; it was a PM loan.
PM loan, yes.
All right, and they paid back some, but not all.
Correct.
And how much did they pay back, and how much?
It looks like they actually had it paid down to about $13,000 in 2010.
Uh-huh.
And then they stopped making the payments, and just due to operating expenses, it increased to about 23,000.
And when you say they stopped making the payments, they didn't just stop making the repayments. They stopped. Did they also stop putting in
They stopped
10%?
making their payments altogether to the PM.
Which I guess is a
Yeah,
de
and-
facto invasion of
Yeah.
PM because
Right.
they're taking money that should have been going into PM and putting it into general.
And when this
They
happened,
did,
it
yeah.
was with a former treasurer, and a new treasurer took over, and this was when all this was discovered, when we went to do the first audit since he had taken over.
And when was that?
We started in 2013, and
Okay.
then
So
we
so
began in 2014.
and when did the new treasurer take over?
I want to say end of 2012, early
Okay.
2013.
And we were sort of emailing about this on the train. Nobody on the board is compensated, correct? Including
That's
the former,
correct.
including the former treasurer.
And yes, that's correct. So they're all volunteers. All
So that means they can screw up.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
No, it means they weren't stealing the money to pay
I
themselves.
understand the stealing part.
I noted something about some
Which
other
seems to be another
the
tactic.
misuse of monies in the file with respect to
There was a
trust account.
Well, that's the big.
Els Miller Special Trust for $46,000, and in 2010, they took that money and spent it on a garage, maintenance, house repairs, and a used truck.
This is a real problem.
And that was in 2010 under the former treasurer, and from what I understand, they spoke with their lawyer, and their lawyer said we could spend this, and that wasn't the case.
And this is, the primary purpose of this is to consolidate the existing loan, repay the Els Miller
So
Trust.
we paid the trust, the Ellesmere Trust.
Right.
As well as the PM deficit.
Although the rules on the trust seem to be pretty liberal about what the interest from the trust can be used. It's not
Yeah.
limited to their plot.
Okay,
But
But
the
they
principal was
they
not
invaded
supposed
the
to have been
principal.
invaded. Right.
yeah, right.
And from what they've said, they were paying back $50 per interment to pay back the money on that trust. So far as of last year, they've paid back like $1,500 or something like that.
And the cemetery is at least in part located in a city.
Is this Amsterdam?
Yeah.
Yes.
So one couldn't easily pull the plug on them.
So this new treasurer is,
But there is the issue of the liability of the trustees and the attorney
Correct.
who advised them.
Well, I'd be happy to get a PM loan from the attorney's carrier.
Yes.
yeah,
I mean, there seems to be a lot of negligence here.
Yes, there definitely was.
all right, so now what's being proposed is what?
Well, the PM deficit, if they were to get the loan, that would bring things back to even. And from last year's income and expenses, just from May through December, it looks like they had an income of around $26,000. But $20,000 of that was for a specific donation for chapel repair. But their income to expenses, they had an income of about $6,000. So it looks like they're starting to turn it around over the last few years. The previous year they were in the hole about $1,500. The year before that, they had income of about $5,000.
What's the status of the PM fund itself? How big is the PM fund?
Their permanent maintenance liability is $92,000. As of right now, they only have $37,000 in assets to cover that.
So how much are they,
So the total amount of the new PM loan with the prior one would be, I believe it's
I think it's 54,726.
$54,000, yeah.
yeah, see, I don't know if I'm, we have to have some discussions, and you know more than I do, a lot more about this stuff, but we're thinking about the cemetery wants to take out a PM loan to reimburse the trust?
Well, it's just to make it legal that the money's already
The money's already been spent.
been spent.
It was spent for operating.
Right.
But they already invaded.
It's a nunc-pro-tunc on the invasion of the PM,
Yes.
but then what about the 46,000?
That's what I'm saying.
for the
That-
trust?
That is.
That's separate. That's not part of the.
That's not part of the 20,
That's
No.
not part of the.
the additional
PM.
26,747.
I misunderstood this then. I thought they were repaying the trust out of this money.
No.
And the trust would be made whole, and then they'd have a hole in their PM fund, which they'd repay over time.
No, the trust is the Ellesmere Trust.
Yeah.
That's being repaid at $50 per
Per interment.
That's separate. The non-pro-tunc order that they're requesting approval of is merely just to legally have a loan in place to repay the permanent maintenance fund. Also, too, this is in the context that this is a 110-acre cemetery with that's only, even if they had all the PM money, would be $92,000. That this is woefully underfunded.
I understand.
The good news is, if there is good news, is that they're actually they've completed paying 2 commercial loans, and they're close to finishing paying a 3rd commercial loan. So that will free up additional financial resources to make good on making the PM whole again and repaying the Ellesmere Trust.
I tell you what, I think we need a little more homework on this, especially with respect to the trust, because the cemetery is paying back a trust which was invaded illegally. Granted, the stuff I suppose was done with money. I'm not, there was no bad intention there, but if in fact there really was an attorney involved in this who blessed it, and the treasurer who blessed it, there's liability there, and I'm not sure that those folks at that cemetery board ought to let those folks off the hook. I mean, Tony, what do you think?
Well, if I understand what the request of the board is, I mean, this stuff about the invasion of the trust is information for the board, but that's not part of the request.
Right, I understand that.
And so this isn't going to impact the cemetery's ability to go after.
No, but they're paying $50. They're paying.
Right.
They're paying to restore the trust.
Right.
We could advise the cemetery that they have options to pursue, recovering.
Right.
I don't see any money here
I mean-
for them to hire an attorney to pursue it.
Well, that's true too.
Well, if there's individual liability, I think they'll find the money. Chris, how many trustees or board members are there?
Let's get that
Let's
How
see
many
if
of them were on the
let me
board
just
at the time?
let me just see if I've got that printed out.
I think maybe the way to do this is for the board to direct the division to do a report solely on that issue. Get a copy of any records, for example, if the attorney authorized the invasion in writing, present that, and see whether whether this board should be directing that board to take legal action to recover funds.
I confess, this is my bad. I totally misunderstood what this was about. I thought they were invading PM solely that their additional invasion of PM was to repay the trust.
But you're saying, Chet, that this is simply to ratify what they've done in the past.
Agreed. Right.
So wait, so that means they did invade PM?
Yes.
This is the invading.
Well, this is their,
invasion where they haven't been paying.
where they haven't been putting the 10% and $35 in.
Correct.
So to the total tune of about $26,747.
In addition to the original PM loan.
I tell you know what? It's not something that needs to be done today. I agree. I don't think we need a board order to direct the division. The division should go and deal with the trust issue, and we're going to wind up probably doing that in executive session.
Right.
All right. With respect to the PM loan, I'd be more comfortable if we all have the same perspective as to what's being asked. So why don't we just, if anybody, I mean, the cemetery doesn't need this done today, right? There's no reason. Let's push it over to the next meeting.
And since when, the only question I have is since when did they start, have they resumed making payments, the 10% and the 35?
Yes, they did.
As of when?
That last year, they had a spreadsheet that they showed that they had made the payments last year.
Yeah, it sounds like with the new treasurer, they've come into the fold.
Right.
All right. I also want to know if the same board was there.
Okay.
Okay. Cedar Hill Cemetery, columbarium. Anybody want to tell us about it? Anything we should know?
Len?
They just, I don't have the paperwork in front of me.
I have it here, Lynn.
27,868 bill,
Okay.
return is 93,240.
Yeah, they feel that they're going to, with the increase of cremation, that they have a need for it in the cemetery. They've been getting a lot of inquiries about columbarium niche outside, and the board feels like they want to install it. And they have the crematory right on the premises as well, so
That's
they
good.
feel like that really will be able to generate sales from the crematory for the columbarium.
Yeah, it sounds like a good project. Was it, they're doing it out of general fund monies?
Yes.
you mentioned?
Yeah.
Any issues with any?
No, they're pretty well set. I don't have the sheet, but I think Alicia included a financial sheet with a pen here, but they're well off financially. There's no problem.
So the division supports it.
And what's the $1,000 for long-term preservation? That's not maintenance? What does that mean?
That's just for like grounds, they're gonna be doing landscaping and for just general landscaping and upkeep.
So it's a one-shot deal.
Yeah, eventually, they just anticipate that at the most it'll cost $1,000 in the long run for the upkeep of the whole area, because if they may expand depending on how sales go with the first columbarium, they might add on as most cemeteries.
But the $1,000, what that is their bookkeeping entry for what they think the maintenance costs are gonna be, so you can balance what their net's gonna be from the sale. So they put that in the investment column essentially. It's just a number, right? All right.
I'll approve it.
Sounds good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, that was easy. Palisades. We've had some informal talk about this, I think, in previous board meetings, and now it's here. So, Palisades, an existing cemetery, which was run perhaps on a for-profit basis, we have no idea, at one time. This group of volunteers have taken it over out of the goodness of their hearts, which is absolutely apparent in the file, and are running it and running it well, and they want to become a not-for-profit. Right? Is that about
Yep.
sum it up? Okay, and they're coming to us for approval of consent to their incorporation as a not-for-profit, because that's one of the powers we have. Before they can successfully file their certificate of incorporation, the division of corporations here, they have to have the consent from the cemetery board. Has anybody talked to the town on this one?
we have not talked to the town
Okay.
directly. Representatives of the group that want to form the cemetery are here today. I understand that
Are they here
have.
today?
They're right here.
Oh, hello, how are you? I'm glad I said goodness of your hearts, you know, I mean.
That was a great introduction.
There you go, okay. Well, tell us about this.
First of all, I guess, identify yourselves
Yes,
for
right.
YouTube and posterity.
Yeah, David Englander, I'm a local resident, I'm also an attorney, and I've been part of the group that's been interested in proceeding with this project. Carol Knudsen is with me today. She is also a resident of Palisades, which is an unincorporated hamlet in southern Nottingham, and a goodly number of her family are buried in the cemetery, as are many of the local residents in Palisades. For years, I think there's actually a little bit of history in terms of the cemetery in relation to its prior or its present ownership, which seems to have been for profit, although it has not sold gravesites for, as far as we can tell, for 10, maybe 12 years. It's in an estate now. We've had consultation with the executor of the estate, is the daughter of the individual who's titled, and she is graciously and generously willing to transfer title to a not-for-profit to be formed. We have thankfully gotten some assistance from the directors of the cemetery in terms of an understanding really of what we're getting ourselves into. And this morning has been a little bit of an education in that regard as well.
What the heck is a cemetery board?
But we're really, so, and
We're the
so
first ones here, I think.
we were here early.
That's correct.
Here early. And we're ready to do this. There's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm in the community. We used to have meetings and they're attended by 30 to 40 people. This is over the course of already a couple of years as we've tried to navigate this process. We're here today, as you say, to really get the endorsement of the cemetery board for the filing of a certificate of incorporation, which would really be the first step, as I gather, in terms of the process of taking title. We're going to need town, and we have had some preliminary discussions in that regard. We're going to need, I believe, county. Proceed with that, if that's deemed necessary. And whatever other consent we need, we will
Right,
go and get.
in what context does the consent of the town apply? How does that come about?
I thought I saw that in the cemetery law.
Yeah, it could well be.
Right. So, I mean, when you say, in what,
Yeah, I don't recall, is that?
yeah, I believe that there's the local municipality, it's not, municipality is sort of not defined, so I wasn't quite clear if that meant the township or that meant the county, or both.
Right.
So I'm not
And
quite.
that's, and Tony would probably be able to answer that, so that,
You'd think so.
so, and the local approval?
It varies by town and county,
But
so
that's
I
not a
couldn't.
consent for the filing of the certificate of incorporation, that's a consent for the operation of the cemetery?
There's different provisions. Some deal with acquiring additional land, some deal with the
Right.
formation of new cemeteries. So I'll have to look.
I believe, my understanding was it had to do with the transfer of the land.
Okay.
We can form the corporation.
Yes.
We can do that, and then we proceed with getting these approvals. I'm not sure that they're title issues, but they are statutory
Right,
requirements.
and is that part of your application to the court then, for the?
Well, we're not quite there yet.
I mean,
Now,
when-
what I wasn't sure about, honestly,
Yeah.
was whether or not, for purposes of receiving title, we needed a court order.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean,
And,
it's one thing to transfer the title. So I'm not sure, but we're here really to get the corporation.
Right.
Of course, the wrinkle between this and pretty much any other cemetery transaction is that it's not real. Number one is set land is not being acquired for cemetery purposes in the sense that the land is already being used for cemetery purposes. So I'm not sure about RPL section 451. The other wrinkle is it's technically a cemetery corporation will be acquiring land, but it's already a cemetery.
But it's not a cemetery corporation.
Well, the acquirer is a cemetery corporation. The land is not currently owned by a cemetery corporation.
Right.
So there's, but I mean, from the division's perspective, we've met with these guys in person, I believe twice, once with me, once with division staff. We've had a number of calls. It seems like, even taking a very conservative approach there with 4 interments and 4 sales a year, they'll be at what they need to have a PM to be operating for the short term. They have I'm going to get this wrong. You have about 3/4 of an acre that's with a normal cleaning should be usable for burial, and then another acre that you'd really have to develop.
Well,
is that about right?
I think approximately.
So they can hit the ground running. Plus, I'm worried what happens if once this estate is wound up. Right now, this group has an opportunity to take the cemetery and run with it. Once this estate is wound up, if somebody else acquires it, who knows whether they would be able to acquire the land. So this is an opportunity to take something that's been kind of operating in a gray area and bring it into the legal realm, and even using pretty conservative assumptions, really make a go of it.
The reason I agree. I mean, I concur. The reason I was asking about the town, of course, is because I'm not sure how it works for abandonment. Obviously, we know how it works for abandonment from a not-for-profit cemetery. It becomes a responsibility of the town. And so I was concerned about their cognizance and approval for the transaction. But it's also true that a cemetery which is used by the inhabitants of a town for burial, which this apparently certainly was, it was not a private cemetery nor a family cemetery, does become the responsibility of the town to maintain, irrespective of whether or not a not-for-profit corporation owns it or not. So that it probably is a matter of little distinction in town. They probably want it to be a not-for-profit cemetery
because otherwise it's theirs.
Because guess what you get? Maybe in 100 years is abandonment monies, which will gleefully administer in 100
On the
years.
other hand, without that not-for-profit corporation, they may get a cemetery without a cent.
They don't get anything. So I don't imagine they'll object, but I do think it's. Well,
one of us ought to make this clear.
They had conversations with the town.
Not officially. I mean, I don't think there's some conversations going back probably 12 years, 15 years that are, memorialized in a couple of pieces of paper and some correspondence where the town had said, this is not our responsibility. I didn't measure that against any changes in the statute or how we got to today, but at some point there was an application made to the town. The town said, this is not our jurisdiction, we don't.
Right, but they'd be very happy to bless it.
What? They'd be very happy to bless it, for sure they would.
Right, yeah, of course they would.
I mean, the only wrinkle is this property currently paying real estate tax?
It's not.
Then it's a no-brainer for them, I would think.
Yeah. So go ahead, Tony.
What?
You know where I'm going with this. Yeah.
I would recommend that the board not approve the certificate of incorporation today, because our normal procedure is to run it by division of corporations first. Otherwise, the board may be approving something that the division rejects and has to be amended. So let us.
Is that just in terms of the format of the?
Right.
Yeah.
Certain requirements have to be
May
included in a certificate of incorporation.
May I make another
I
suggestion?
don't have a problem with the condition.
That's what I would prefer, so they don't have to come back here.
I don't have a problem with that. There's two things that I have to resolve. all right?
And Tony could be one of the conditions.
That
I have no problem with that.
One, that it's acceptable to the, well, I would give it to Tony. I would give it to you, all right, to harmonize the consent form based upon your discussions with council and corporations, all right, and their submission, their discussion and their submission to you.
Okay.
The other thing is, I would like to see some knowledge and acquiescence by the town to this. All right, so that I would leave that to you to procure for us if we
Would
could
that
have.
be as a condition of the endorsement of
Yeah.
the certificate?
That's
The only
that's
problem
Go ahead.
is when the board approves a certificate of incorporation, there's an actual form I create that gets attached.
Right.
I'm not sure that I could word that if we're doing a conditional order. I just have concerns that that's going to
Tony?
gum it up.
Couldn't you just wait to do the form until you've worked out whatever you need to work out with corporations?
Which means I'm coming back to the division, to the board to approve.
That would be fine, but they would have, I think that would be fine. You all have our philosophical approval, you wouldn't have to come back. We would simply, presumably next meeting, you would come back with what was submitted by the applicant, and we would then approve it.
Okay.
And so for the next time this happens, to avoid this problem, I should loop in you and corporations.
But what's the benefit of approving it now? They're not going to be able to take any action until they have a certificate of incorporation with that endorsement.
No, there really is no benefit because you're coming back, but
Right.
the benefit, well, you're hearing our discussion, we're very open about these things, we really discuss them.
Appreciate it, right.
Well, before I
They've been
say
working
anything, I
on it
want
12
these
years.
guys,
Well,
I want these guys to have an opportunity.
If we want the
to
input
chat.
from the town in relation to the next board meeting, we're meeting the 17th, so that's only 3 weeks. It's a short time frame, right? For the next meeting.
And you don't have to come back if this
Right.
sits put over.
And what you're looking for really is the town to endorse this process.
To acquiesce in that, yes, to endorse.
Acquiesce in the formation and the transference of the property to a not-for-profit corporation to be run and operated by the local
Right,
resident.
I think because they have an interest in this,
I understand.
I think it's appropriate for them to have an opportunity to address the board on it. So
Right.
something on their letterhead or whatever,
understand.
can be directed to Tony.
Okay. And Tony, I would email you a copy of the certificate in the format that we would propose.
Yes.
Uh,
Which I think
We already
is
have
already
it,
in the
don't we?
packet.
What's
I
that?
think
We already
I
have
saw a draft
Okay, yes, you did.
in the packet.
Do we have any other discussion before we?
And the board is satisfied with I know the issue, the sort of threshold issue we had was the projections.
We have no more issues, right? We have no more issues other than to satisfy those two requirements. One's pro forma with respect to the structure of the certificate of incorporation itself, and the other is substantive with respect to the town's.
And we don't think we need anything from the county, correct?
I don't think so. There may be a statutory piece, but I'm not aware of any.
I don't think there's an RPO. I don't think, even though Rockland is one of the counties covered by real property law 451, obviously this is council's call, but I don't see how that comes into play here.
I didn't either, but I'll leave it, I mean, obviously, if there's something else that we'll cover that needs to be addressed, Tony.
Right.
We can discuss that. Okay, so you have our endorsement and informal approval. If all goes well, at the next meeting, we'll be in a position to approve the application. You need something else, all right? And what we'll do, I mean, you can if you want to, because I know it's so much fun to be here. But we'll let you know when the meeting is, and you can be available by phone, or in fact, we'll dial you by phone if you like, and so you can be privy to the conversations.
That's in 3 weeks, if I understand.
Unless it gets adjourned, not adjourned, rescheduled, it's, well,
It'd be the
when is
17th of July?
Right.
This is 3 weeks, right?
Okay. 17th of
Do
July.
our best. I mean, I guess the issue really will be whether we produce the consent, if you will, of the
Yeah,
town.
it'd be very informal. All I want to
Right,
know
no,
is
I
that,
understand.
all I want to know is that they're aware of it and that they don't have a problem with it.
And what if they're not, what if they're willing to say that, but not yet willing to put it in writing?
If they say that to Tony and he testify to that, I have no problem with that either. It'd be in the minutes. We could pull them up on the phone.
Right.
I mean, that would be fine
Because
too.
is the town supervisor enough here, or are you gonna need an actual?
No, I just need the town. For me, I just wanna know the
Town
town.
supervisor
Corporation
would be-
council?
Would be easier than the town.
Exactly, that's what I'm thinking, is the town supervisor or town attorney, we might be able to
I wasn't
get,
asking for a
but
resolution or anything.
that's what I'm wondering, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Do we think we need a resolution for anything?
I don't know the answer to that question yet. Like I said,
Fair enough.
there are specific counties identified in the various provisions of Article
Right.
15. I just have to go back and check. I can't answer that question until I do.
Yeah, okay. So you'll be, if there's anything else required, you folks can exchange information before we leave. And this is almost the last thing, so we'll be concluding our open session in just a few minutes, and then hopefully we can trade cards. Is that okay?
Yeah, well, we already did that.
Oh, you did? Oh, so
We
you
did
did.
that, but you want, should I hang out?
No, we can talk tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we'll table this for next meeting, but we did a lot of good work.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Oh, no, our pleasure. All right, Bayside Cemetery, let's see. Yeah, somebody tell us about this, what's another
Mike?
one?
Bayside Cemetery is up in Potsdam, New York. They have a historic gatehouse, caretaker's house. It's a big, I don't know if you have photos in there, it's a big red stone building. It was donated by the Clarkson family to the cemetery years and years and years
Right.
ago. It's fallen into disrepair. The estimates that they received were 4 repairs to make it habitable or habitable. It's $378,700.
Right.
It's got the old classic slate roof. It's a beautiful building, but the interior is just, I guess it's uninhabitable.
Give me pizza, that's what I take care of this.
It's
Some cement and trowel.
It sits at the front of the cemetery. The cemetery is probably, the area that has burials is probably 600 or 700 feet to the east of this building. So along with the building would go the 2 acres, which would be the frontage of the cemetery. The driveway cuts kind of kitty corner through that 2 acres. They've determined that they don't want to sell it to, they don't want it to be a private residence because it's at the entrance of the cemetery. They don't want it to be a business because it's at the entrance of the cemetery. Clarkson has agreed that they would take it as a donation and buy it for $1. And in return, Clarkson has been providing some services, and they would continue to provide those services.
That's
As a-
$2,000 something a year and
Well,
or whatever.
Yeah, well, in addition to what they have been doing, they've agreed to cut up to 5 dead trees annually. The cemetery is full of huge old maple trees, and many times old maple trees, the centers die, and then they become a hazard. So Clarkson will be using their ground staff and equipment to provide maintenance in the cemetery, and they've estimated at $8,301 annually.
Oh, that's different than, I told the wrong figure. I had 2,600.
Well, the 2,600 figure comes from the insurance and utility costs
I see.
that they're spending on on the building now
Now.
and not being able to use it. And then that 8,301 comes from removing 5 dead trees from the cemetery grounds annually, providing equipment and personnel to remove leaves from the cemetery twice a year, which is a huge expense with 20 acres of maple trees. And plowing the cemetery up to 15 times annually.
Really?
How much of it do they plow? Do they just plow the major
They'll get them
roads?
to December.
Or-
They'll get them to December.
Yeah, in Potsdam.
Well, maybe.
The actual, the main road would be into the caretaker house, and then probably 600 feet back to the entrance of the cemetery, and that's where their vault is. So they may have winter burials if they can have winter burials, but they also would maybe be using the vault. So that,
So plowing the cemetery just means plowing the entrance road up to the
Yes.
vault.
Yes.
So what's the annual benefit to the cemetery that Clarkson's providing then over and above, the estimated annual over and above the 2,600? Is it like 10 a year, 12 a year?
$8,301 annually.
That includes everything you were discussing just
That,
now.
that would be above and beyond the $2,000 saving, the $2,600 savings.
So to get to the appraised value, you're talking about 8 to 10 years of services. But
Yeah.
these services are in perpetuity.
I have it listed as these, yes, yes.
Well, let's have a discussion about that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I got some
There you go.
questions.
9
You
years.
know what? I've been hogging this one, so I'm gonna yield. Go for it, guys. I yield the floor.
I don't think it's clear in the agreement what Clarkson is obligated to do. It wasn't clear to me. The first question I had was, who is paying for the legal and professional fees to get it done? There's a suggestion that Clarkson is, but that's not clear. Secondly, there's a provision in there that when Clarkson sells, it gets out of the whole deal.
Right.
That was, yes,
And
that's not acceptable.
that was I mean, we're already
although-
giving away the building.
Would it be acceptable if Clarkson, that if it sells, that they guarantee that they'll give the services for X number of years, even if they sell before then? I mean, let's say they sell in 50 years, the cemetery probably comes out ahead.
Let's turn to,
There's a lot of
can I get everybody to turn to, this is Exhibit D. I don't know if everybody printed this.
Yep.
Exhibit D to the petition, that's the actual agreement
Mhm.
between the university and the cemetery. Third page of that has the
Reps.
university's representations and warranties. As far as I can see, this is the only legally binding
That's what I wanted to talk
obligation of Clarkson. So I'll read it. I'll have it on the record. The very first is maintenance. It says, after closing, the university shall be responsible for the maintenance, repair, and operational costs associated with the property, including the lawn, trees, shrubs, driveways, wall, and gate. I see no benefit to the cemetery.
Yep.
Because that's the property that Clarkson is buying.
Right.
So of course it has to maintain
So
its
we're
own
not talking
property.
about the 5 trees, not
Yeah,
talking
we're
about the
not-
plowing, we're not
that's
talking
right.
about any of that.
That has absolutely no benefit to the cemetery. B, utilities. Beginning on the date of closing and until the university no longer owns the property, the university shall provide or pay for all water, sewer, and electrical services required for Bayside's continuing operation of the cemetery. And 2, maintain any such systems owned by the university. I don't know what that number 2 means. What systems are owned by the university that impact Bayside's operation of the cemetery?
I think with there's a stone wall that separates this 2-acre parcel with the gatehouse from the cemetery, and I believe the wall will go with the property. Approximately, 6 inches from that wall is the cemetery office, and that is what they had agreed to continue paying water and electric for the cemetery office. So that would be separate from what they own. They would own the caretaker's house, and they would be paying that, obviously. I believe that the utilities for that office would be in addition.
All right, but I'm not sure that university would own. All right, but let's stick with number 1.
Okay.
Number 1 is an obvious benefit to the cemetery. The university is agreeing to provide or pay for all water, sewer, electrical services for Bayside's continuing operation of the cemetery, and for as long as they own the property. And then on the next page, letter F, it says, in the event of a sale of the property by the university, all terms of this agreement shall remain in effect without change for the entity making such purchase. So it sounds like Clarkson's saying if we sell this to anyone, they have to continue to pay for these utilities and other services.
But is there any limitation on development? Is there any,
There is. Uses. The university shall not permit any use of the property which would be detrimental to Bayside's mission as reasonably determined by Bayside's Board of Trustees. So that sounds like the Board of Trustees of the cemetery has a veto,
And once it's
as long
sold,
as it's reasonably used.
Yeah, that's exactly my question. So, but after the Clarkson divests itself of the property, then the cemetery is no say.
And the stuff about the tree, and as you both pointed out, the stuff about the trees and all that isn't
Yeah,
in here.
it
Although
isn't
I
in here.
think, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this agreement dates to their original plan to donate the property to the university, which the board rightly rejected.
I don't know that it even came to the
It
board.
never-
I know I was
Yeah.
against.
I think we discussed it at a meeting,
Uh,
and we told them, go back and rethink this.
Yeah.
And is there any obligation to maintain the structure?
Yes.
Okay, what is that?
Well, it says, university, it doesn't,
You weren't stuck on a train for an hour.
well, the first section actually does, maintenance. After closing, university shall be responsible for the maintenance, repair, and operational costs associated with the property.
But that doesn't place an affirmative obligation on them
Right.
to maintain it to any
The
particular
building,
standard.
It says that, letter D to this provision, the university shall permit Bayside to review any substantial repairs, alterations, or additions to the exterior of the gatehouse prior to commencement of such.
Why don't they consider, I'm sort of blue sky in this, why don't they consider an easement on this to allow the use of the property by Cornell, and then they maintain.
Clarkson?
By Clarkson, and then they, hockey rivalries.
Right.
And then they maintain, future control of the building, and the grounds, because the problem with this is that this is the front of their cemetery.
Right.
So it's very important to the cemetery that this be maintained, and,
Easement or lease?
yeah, lease is a better, thank you. Yeah, a leasehold, I'm throwing it out there, I'm not opposed to the concept of this thing. But right now, it's not structured correctly, either in terms of the obligations of the college.
And that's another
or
point.
University.
There's also in this list of the university's obligations, there's letter E, at Bayside access. At all times, the university shall permit Bayside, its employees and agents access to the cemetery via our right-of-way from Clarkson Avenue to and through the gate. It doesn't say that people using the cemetery, lot purchasers, lot owners, families, can use that right-of-way.
Is the cemetery represented by an attorney on this?
Yes, the attorney's actually on the board of the cemetery.
Okay, so I think we ought to have a conversation with the attorneys, what we're looking for, or what the cemetery is in the interest of the cemetery, but we have some real concerns about what was presented to us as the final agreement. It doesn't reflect, what the division has been told is the deal.
The last wrinkle,
Is there an amendment, Mike? that
the
we
last
have?
legal
Well-
wrinkle I have is, when a cemetery sells its property, the funds are supposed to go into the PM fund. Obviously, with an in-kind
That's true.
payment, you have no money going to the PM fund. You have the cemetery divesting land, but nothing to go into the PM fund as required by statute. It's,
Leasehold.
yeah, a lease, an easement. There's lots of other ways to.
If they rent, that doesn't apply, if they lease the land.
Well, correct.
Right. That,
I have from the
You want to be
CFO
incentive for
of,
Clarkson to do that?
would it be what?
They want that building. Clarkson has an interest in seeing that building maintained, and they want to use it.
Right, so
Why they feel they need to buy to have that right?
they probably thought this was an easy way to do it.
No, I think they don't,
One of the motivations is for the cemetery to get out from under the expense of insurance and.
I mean, it's falling into disrepair.
Yeah.
but I think from
correct,
Clarkson's
right.
perspective, they don't want to spend cash. It doesn't, if
Well, they're
they're
going to have to
plowing
maintain
any,
this building.
yeah, but if they have a ground crew sending them out to do another few trees, it's a different kind of incremental cost than actually.
You can
writing
have an
a check.
in-kind lease.
Yeah. that's
Nothing
right.
else needs to be.
That's what I'm thinking. That's, we could have all these, we're not talking about money, we could have
I
all
like-
these benefits
oh,
to the
yeah.
cemetery, which are real. I got it, all right, I like it.
So structured as a lease with the rent being in kind?
Yeah.
That's the consideration.
Oh.
But make it more clear that Clarkson is responsible for fixing and maintaining that building
Right,
through that lease.
I've got a letter from
be like a double net lease.
the chief financial officer of Clarkson outlining the in-kind services, the trees and whatnot,
Right,
and that's not included in the agreement.
and what right to be,
The other thing they don't have to do if they lease is they don't have to go to court.
right. So we got a much cleaner way for them to do it. So, Mike, why don't you suggest that and poor Mr. Malillo. But he'll have to be the contact with the attorney, all right? But we think we got a better way, a way that we don't even have to approve, right?
It probably would save him money. Wait, we could approve that without you?
We don't have, right?
Yeah, I don't think that's.
How's this different from a cell tower lease, though?
I'm sorry?
How's this different from a cell tower lease? Because the property's
Well,
already
the cell
exists.
tower leases,
Major
um,
renovation
There's no major renovation here.
for the cell
Right.
tower.
yeah.
That's right, there's no major renovation, that's what.
Oh, so we don't have to bother you with this if they do it.
Cell
that way.
tower leases also have provisions that they can be extended in perpetuity, so they're closer to a conveyance of land than this would be.
Okay. And this would be like a 99-year or 50-year lease or something like that.
If it's one of those that's closer to a conveyance, we might bring it to the board
Yeah.
because of the length of the lease. But otherwise, no.
Okay.
Cool? Wow, okay, very good. All right, so we will table that and maybe withdrawn, all right? If we work it out and it doesn't need support.
If any items tabled on the agenda, unless their applications are complete, I will remove them from next month's agenda, yeah?
No, you can leave tabled ones on there.
Okay.
Just note that they're tabled.
All right, very good.
Track of them on
Right. Okay, so this concludes the public agenda of the board.
And our next meeting is July 17th, right?
7:17.
Correct. It's always the third Thursday.
Right.
At 10:30. All right.
Just 3 weeks.
All right.
It's just 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So having so concluded, I will open up the floor. Anybody would like to address us for any reason whatsoever?
Joanne Sullivan, President of NYSAC. I just want to thank the division for their assistance with these regionals that we're putting on. They're very near and dear to my heart. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. We sent out about 1,200 registration forms, and out of that, only between 90 and 100 people.
Yeah.
So we're not reaching everyone. Louis and I have had conversations about continuing again in the fall. One of the most important topics, I feel, is the not-for-profit revitalization. We have to get these cemeteries on board.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if the division can come up with any kind of person to speak in a simplified manner, to educate these cemeteries. I think it's something that has to be done, and, we're looking at October. So
You've
there's
got a
no
real
more-
ally here in Lewis. He's been banging our heads to get some guidance.
Right, before then, we
Right.
will have written guidance
Yeah.
on the subject.
Okay.
But in terms of a Q&A,
We do have one of our vice president, who will be taking over as president in September, who is also an attorney from Kensico, will be attending, and he will try to come up with a program. But I think we have to do it in conjunction.
Yeah,
with the division.
I know the division's very interested in outreach, and we are developing some guidance.
although I think whoever did, I forget who it was it the folks from JP Morgan who did it at the policy conference?
I wasn't there, so.
Whoever did it at the policy conference, I don't know what you thought, Tony. I thought they pretty much nailed it.
I don't know that we'd get them to come all over.
Okay, fair
the
enough.
state. That's a tough one. I tried
That's your
to get
bailiwick.
them.
And,
I don't recall, there might have actually been handouts for that.
There
Which if they're willing to allow us
Yeah,
to-
well, that's, we have 3 months to deal with this.
Sure.
Your conference. The statute takes effect on Tuesday.
Right.
Yeah.
But I imagine there's gonna be about a year of legal. There has to be. There has to be.
Well, I don't plan on citing anyone for a violation if they haven't complied by Wednesday.
Yeah, right. It'll be a learning curve for everybody.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Ken.
Anybody else? It's nice to see you anyway. Well, all right then, that will conclude the public session, unless we have something coming out of executive session, which I doubt. But in any event, I will move to go into executive session for investigative and litigative matters. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Let's take a 5-minute break and then do it. Thanks.
The chair might, there you go.
All right. Having no motions to report, I would motion to adjourn.
Second.